It's not often that I find a game with so much love and care poured into it, while also creating its own very unique identity. Even some of my favorite games, like Devil May Cry 5 or Bug Fables, are still sequels, if not spiritual successors, so it's always special when I find something so original like God Hand. I do have more than a few major gripes with it, but I also believe that this is a standout game on the PS2 that most people will enjoy a lot. God Hand tells the story of Jean and Olivia, a traveling duo who are taking down evildoers across the wasteland, focusing on the Four Devas, a group of demons seeking to resurrect their dark lord. On his journey, Jean runs into quite the colorful cast of characters, and defeats them all with insane over-the-top action.
He's such a sexy man! Just my type!
I'm not that kind of guy!
There's not much to the story. There is a little bit of depth and backstory to some of the characters, which is actually pretty well done. Gene is lazy and likes to complain a lot, but deep down he has a strong sense of justice. He'll never shy away from helping someone in need. It sounds a little anime cliche, and it is like that at times, but it never gets too obnoxious.
But they know we're here now. We need to find a safer place.
Aw, Gene, you're worried about me.
No way! I'm gonna get her back one of these days.
In fact, the presentation's greatest strength is its humor. I think the easiest way to describe this is to think of it as Mad Max, but as directed by Tex Avery. Despite the bleak world and serious stakes, there is such a Looney Tunes approach to pretty much everything.
Yeah!
If this isn't necessarily your style of humor, then you're probably not going to like it all that much, but I find this ridiculous cartoon approach to be fantastic. This is helped along with the voice acting, which the direction does come off as stilted at times, but overall I think it's effective, funny, and well done.
Get ready, cause I'm really gonna give it to you! Hey, you're the big nice hero, right? How about giving me a hand here?
Huh?
Come on!
Oh, I'll help you out all right.
¡A la mierda!
The visuals and animation are really beautiful for the PS2, and I'd say it's one of the best looking games on the console. That's not to say that it has the same cinematic flair of Shadow of the Colossus or the remarkable texture work and camera direction of Silent Hill 3, but God Hand looks damn good in its own right, especially with the expressive faces. After the cel-shaded style of Beautiful Joe and Okami, it's great to see Clover Studio pull off a somewhat more realistic approach, and do it this well. It goes to show just how multi-talented they were before getting shut down. It's more than just the cutscenes though. Even the little idle animations and gameplay add so much charm and character to a game already filled with it. The various insulting taunts, most of which are actually Mike Tyson quotes, they're not only great, but they help cue the player in to when an enemy is open, as well as the cartoony whistling bird sound effect when they get dizzy. Strong sound effects are important at nailing down the feeling of a good action game, something Capcom games usually do well, and this one is no exception. The music is worth bringing up too. Not too many tracks are a big deal in my opinion, but there isn't a single bad song in the game. And despite everything sounding so weird and off-kilter, doubly so for an action game, nothing is out of place. It all manages to fit well, and the boss themes are awesome. The gameplay boils down to a traditional beat-em-up, but with a more modern approach and with a lot more depth than those games tend to have. Everything you'd expect is here, From throwing items, weapons that both you and the opposition can use, basic enemy archetypes with plenty of recolors, and randomly draw power-ups and healing items. While the majority of levels are a linear point A to point B affair, some of them mix things up with larger maps to explore, a couple of mazes to navigate, and hostages to protect, all of which adds much needed variety to a formula that usually gets stale quickly. Perhaps the two most unique features, and the biggest draws of this game, are the attack and combo customization and the dynamic difficulty. Both of which sound really interesting on paper, but in practice, I'm not sure how well it works out. What the combo customization comes down to is scrolling through a huge list of punches and kicks and finding the right balance of powerful attacks that also link well into each other. I found myself liking this a lot. I had a lot of fun putting together a build that felt unique to me, but it also makes me wonder just how much time ends up being dedicated to this, rather than just playing the game. That being said, there is a lot that can be done here. I often tried using the yes man kablam whenever possible. Despite it being an extremely weak, slow, and short-range punch, it also acts as a more powerful taunt to quickly build up my super meter. I could also assign power attacks, low sweeps, juggles, and so on to the other buttons. There are very, very few limitations. I could also customize my main combo to, let's say, have a guard break somewhere in the middle if I wanted, which can be unexpectedly useful at times. But that does come at the cost of attack power, since there are usually both stronger and faster attacks to choose from. This also encourages replay value in that you can try out totally unique combos in future playthroughs, not unlike trying out different guns in Resident Evil 4 and 5. So yeah, I like it. But again, I wonder how much focus ends up being taken away from the main game. And it's not like you can ignore this, since a lot of attacks are just straight upgrades. So it's important to check back in after each chapter and take your time perusing the updated catalog. The point is, there's a little bit more to this game than merely being a beat 'em up. It does require some maintenance. Unlike Beautiful Joe or Devil May Cry, where the player's repertoire is simply added onto, with God Hand, you'll need to reevaluate what's available in the shop after each chapter. And for the majority of the gameplay, you're just going to be mashing the square button anyway. The other aspect, and one that I do take great issue with, is that of the dynamic difficulty system. Depending on how well or how poorly the player performs, the difficulty will either raise or drop respectively, as can be viewed by a gauge in the bottom left corner. The difficulties range from levels 1, 2, 3, and then the appropriately named level die. With each difficulty, enemy aggression increases and their tactics will improve. At level 1, enemies are more content with fighting you one-on-one, and guard breaks are much easier to pull off. As the difficulty goes up, the timing window for a guard break becomes unreasonable, enemies are much more resistant to launches and juggles, and everyone is a lot less shy about ganging up on you. On level die, the enemy also attains a much higher attack speed. But worst of all is the insane increase in damage. I can be performing quite well, everything appears to be going my way for the most part, but then, seemingly out of nowhere, my entire bar of health just disappears in an instant. Keep in mind that at this stage in the game, my health is maxed out, and I'm playing on the normal difficulty. Although the only differences between the difficulty selection from a new game is that easy limits the player to only levels 1 and 2, normal grants the full range, and hard is permanently set to level die. So yeah, the difficulty jumping around and the player potentially getting one-shotted is the game working as intended. Part of how the game is designed is that infinite continues are allowed, and dying will significantly decrease the difficulty level. If you're taking a more casual approach with the game, then this is fine. You simply progress as much as you can until the game gets too hard, then you die, continue, and have an easier time until you hit another wall. For me, this feels awful. Losing in a game is equivalent to failure, but overcoming that obstacle is where the fun lies. As long as the difficulty is reasonable and well balanced, then I don't mind losing over and over again as long as I can eventually succeed at my chosen difficulty. God Hand offers no such option. It's almost impossible to beat the whole game without dying once, which means that the difficulty will drop and the game is giving you a pass. You know how in games like Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry, if you die too many times, then the game offers you to play on easy. With God Hand, you're not even given the option. The game tells you suck and unceremoniously drops you down a level. Normally, that would be enough to annoy me, but like I said earlier, the difficulty jumps are downright ludicrous. It is so severe that I dare say it's less of a challenge and more of a punishment for playing the game too well. Of course, dynamic difficulties are hardly anything new or unusual in video games. However, most of the time, it's hidden behind the scenes. I've never seen dynamic difficulty done in a video game where it's so overt. It would be as if I was playing something like, say, Doom Eternal, but the difficulty jumps around all over the place. Eventually, I do well enough for the game to place me on Nightmare, but I'm obviously not going to last long, so I get dropped down to Ultraviolence. Now I'm doing okay, or at the very least, I'm at a difficulty level that I'm comfortable with, but either I'm going to lose again eventually because I'm not perfect, and the game drops me further and to hurt me plenty, or I do well enough to ascend back into Nightmare where it's impossible for me to proceed. Either scenario sucks for me. On the one hand, Hurt Me Plenty is too easy and I want a greater challenge, or Nightmare is way too much for me to handle. But the dynamic difficulty system has me jumping back and forth and it never feels great. That's God Hand, and I don't like that aspect about it. It should be mentioned that this all plays into a ranking system. The game keeps track of how many continues you used and how many enemies were dispatched at each difficulty, all of which plays into how much gold is awarded at the end of each chapter to be exchanged for new upgrades. At the end of the game, you can see a final summary of how well you did, and I will admit a sense of some pride. I think I did reasonably well, but a lot of it is dissipated due to how easily everything can go so wrong. It feels downright unfair at times. You can never get into a comfortable spot or feel like you're really mastering the game. And the worst part is that this is easily solved by just having a normal difficulty selection like every other video game does. I mean, was this little experiment worth it? I don't think it added that much. It certainly wasn't worth replacing a traditional difficulty selection. A couple of my other issues include the dodging mechanic, which is tied to the right joystick. Jean can dodge to the left or right, backflip away, or dodge in place. Staying close to your opponent is ideal for getting hits in, but the invulnerability frames on the backflip are just too good, and receiving attacks can be so punishing that a lot of the game is going to come down to hit and run tactics. Lay down a few smacks, backflip if you're afraid of getting hit, and rinse and repeat. Couple this with the overly aggressive groups of enemies, and you can find yourself backflipping a lot, or running in wide circles in an attempt to find an opening on the higher difficulties. Worse yet, since dodging is tied to the joystick, it can be easy to accidentally register a wrong input. And going back to how damaging attacks can be on the higher difficulties, this can be devastating and feels awful when it occurs due to a very slight accidental error in the heat of the moment. A suggestion that my good buddy One Doom Game Critic had was to put dodging on the D-pad instead of the right joystick. I could see that potentially working out better, especially considering how dodging in itself is a form of movement, so it's not too much of a sacrifice to let go of the left joystick for a moment. At the end of the day though, this is what we've got to work with. It's fine for the most part, but considering how fast-paced the game is, it feels awful when such a slight slip-up leads to death. And again, this is magnified on the higher difficulties, which I got to only because I was doing so well before. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I hope I'm making my case clear on why these ideas sound good on paper, but can easily falter in practice. And then, there are the completely random elements. As far as I can tell, there's absolutely no rhyme or reason as to what items a fallen enemy will drop, if any at all. There is a tremendous difference between a banana or a strawberry appearing in terms of either 50% or 100% health recovery. And while any fruit is welcome, it certainly feels like the game loves to toy with the player. The same goes for those giant cards with pictures of skulls on them or a scantily clad bikini babe, all of which are valuable power-ups. Now, it is uncommon for nothing to show up, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And again, the frequency and type of items are completely random. You're utterly at the mercy of a dice roll for any help in this game. So not only is it insanely punishing, but victory can sometimes feel dependent on getting lucky, especially on your first time through. Or you can just be unlucky. Also at complete random, fallen enemies can transform into insanely powerful demons. These are the strongest enemies in the game, by far. So much so that it's almost a necessity to use your God Hand or Roulette super moves just to survive. These can be seen as your get-out-of-jail-free options, dealing massive damage to bosses or group of enemies. But because of the utterly random nature of demons appearing, and since these options are not so easily replenished, you're actually better off saving them just in case a demon appears. That doesn't sound great to me. I don't like the idea of being given an alternative form of action, but then I get punished for at least trying to use it creatively. If you use these special moves too early and then a demon shows up, you're kind of out of luck. There's very little you can do against these guys. Speaking of which, the God Hand meter is obviously similar to Devil May Cry's own Devil Trigger, but all it does is just make Gene invulnerable and greatly powers him up for a short time. No health regeneration or unique special attacks in this mode. In fact, once you turn it on, you have no choice but to wait for the meter to run out. It's the laziest implementation of the idea. It's really just the give me breathing room button. If the game was only extremely punishing, or if it were only very random, then I wouldn't be nearly as harsh. But combine both of these elements on top of the difficulty jumping all over the place, and I only end up finding this game far more frustrating than it should be. Add on to that a couple of other minor grievances. The auto-aim isn't the greatest. It is serviceable for the most part, but a couple of times it'll falter, and since the game is the way it is, it's totally possible for a minor mistake to lead to death. That's definitely part of the reason why I would look for any possible avenue to help cheapen the game, like drawing the attention of one enemy at a time. I hate this kind of stuff. As much as I do like Dark Souls, I've always hated how prominent this strategy is. It's not fun to so deliberately abuse the computer's AI, and God Hand doesn't do it any better. The camera is also so zoomed in that it can be difficult to get a grasp of the player's surroundings. If you've played something like God of War 2018, especially on the higher difficulty, then you'll have an idea of why this can be a problem. And take this as you will, but the amount of button mashing in this game is simply too much. Once my square or circle buttons stop responding, I'll know exactly what game to blame it on. Look, as much as I want to love this game, because there is a lot to love, it has so many of these downright stupid implementations, and I cannot find a proper reason for their inclusion. When wave after wave of enemies just keep on coming, and I'm on level 3 or level die, and the game is just not giving me a break. I don't see that as the exciting challenge that it should be. It instead pisses me off. and I'll never know if I managed to win due to skill, or if I got lucky from the right items dropping at the right times, or if I lost because the right items never dropped. I'm already not a big fan of most roguelites, like Binding of Isaac, Rogue Legacy, Enter the Gungeon, or Crypt of the Necrodancer. All of these games rely heavily on luck to provide the player with an exciting experience. But I don't find luck to be exciting, I find it infuriating. It's the same reason why I can't stand the recent trend of Battle Royale games. And even some games that I do love, like Super Ghouls and Ghosts, I would appreciate it if the luck present in that game was a lot more limited. Now, I understand that luck and random elements being used sparingly can help make even a single-player game more interesting. But I do believe that God Hand takes it way too far. This game is unbalanced to the point where it's no longer fun to play it at a reasonable level of skill. I mean, come on, I'm on the normal difficulty here. Would it kill you to be at least a little more forgiving? Am I really expected to have to continue 100 times just to beat the game? I think that's a touch excessive. You either approach it super casually and just take in the gloriously fun world without a care of how well you're actually doing.
Time to shuffle up and deal! I've got a killer hand!
I've got a killer hand!
You're gonna get it!
You're gonna get it!
Quit imitating me!
Ah, this is dumb.
Or you practically dedicate your life to this game and get used to all the awkward nuances and unintuitive features and unpolished mechanics and unfair balancing. And at that point, I'd rather play something else. Now, before proceeding with this, I want to be very clear here. I wrote all of this review before I even watched this video that I'm showing now. I wanted to have an idea of what really high-level God Hand play looks like, and as far as I can tell, this guy is one of the best players in the world. Now, I'm not going to be an idiot with cherry-picked anecdotal evidence and say stupid things like, oh look guys, this is the only way you can beat God Hand. You have to completely break the game apart and do extremely cheap tactics like this. Oh, what a fun game. That's not the point of this example. I get that this is just goofy speedrunning stuff that typically happens when you overly master a game. That's fine. The part that I find telling is that even on the highest level of skill, this player does appear to share some of my sentiments. And on the highest difficulty, the game really is insanely overly punishing in response to the slightest errors.
What? Dude, I was still targeting her? She was on the other side of a fucking wall. You fucking dickweed. Forest, that's fine, whatever. God, I hate Conchita so much. Yo, I did not tell you to get up right away, but hey, let's lose all of my HP because you did whatever the fuck you wanted to, Gene.
Now, take that as you will, but I think it's fair to say that I have at least some standing here. The two things that I wish I made better use of in my playthrough was dodging in place and using the juggle into launch attacks. And to be fair, this is given a mention in the instruction booklet, but considering how powerful of an option this is, I think the game really could have benefited from a more in-depth explanation. Not to mention that this is a game built entirely around customizing your offensive approach. Quite frankly, I don't really understand why these special juggle and launch options are technically hidden. There's just so much about this game that is at odds with each other, and it makes me so upset because I see the potential here. I want so much more out of this game, but it's so frustrating to play when I try to take it seriously. It's especially crazy to me how even this guy is just throwing out guard breaks randomly with no real strategy. See, the way the game works is that attacking a blocking opponent will cause the player to get pushed back. Thus, you need to counter with a guard break. Makes sense. On levels 1 and 2, this is easy enough to pull off. But for the higher 2 levels, it's completely impossible to react to. The only way you'll manage to pull it off is by throwing out a guard break randomly and hope that the enemy tries to block it. But you'll need to be careful because your guard break attack can also be dodged and countered itself. It's not wise to ignore this either because guard breaks are the best way to dizzy an opponent, which leads to some of the most powerful attacks available. Again, this game just does not give you a break. It feels like there's really nothing you can do. God Hand is like a spoiled brat, and you have to let it win. Okay, a couple of other interesting little tidbits to cover before I finish this whole review. There's an in-game casino complete with blackjack, video poker, and slot machines. I find it appropriate considering how luck-driven so much of the game already is, so might as well throw in a whole casino while we're at it. There's also Chihuahua racing, and the payouts seem like they can be really, really good. If you're having a hard time with the game and you want to make some extra gold to buy upgrades or new attacks, then save scumming and betting heavily on the Chihuahua races probably isn't a bad idea. The slot machine on the second floor also seems to be very profitable for some reason. Anyway, the casino stuff is cool. It's just a nice little optional minigame. Alongside the casino is the Extreme Fighting Ring. This allows you to practice your combo and see what works before actually spending gold in the shop, which is extremely welcome. The main feature here, however, is an arena-based mission mode. It's a collection of various groups of enemies and boss fights to be completed under certain conditions, such as time limits, low health, or limited special attacks. This is similar to a series of hidden challenges in the main game, like destroying a car Street Fighter II style. Although in this case, each mission has its own set difficulty and is much more reasonably balanced. With the exception of Mission 15. That one's no fun at all. But most of these are great and even feature a few exclusive enemies. This arena mode is some of the most fun I've had in this game, and a large part of it has to do with its consistency. You know what you're getting into ahead of time, it's balanced around a certain difficulty, and there's little punishment for failing. You simply keep trying again until you overcome that said challenge. And that's how I like my games. The last thing I want to bring up is, unfortunately, another complaint. There is sort of a New Game Plus option. Upon restarting the game over again, the full shop becomes available from the beginning, along with some new attacks that are meant to be insanely strong. However, everything you bought on your previous save file, along with all of your money, is taken away. So you'll need to build everything up all over again. It's so annoying because several arena missions are added just for New Game Plus, but you can't realistically access them for a while since you'll need to re-earn a ton of money and re-buy everything you want. It's really obnoxious and I don't get what's the point. If you wanted to start from scratch, then just do a regular new game. The way it is now, you either have to beat the game twice in order to level up Gene, or I guess you spend a ton of time in the casino. It's an unnecessary blemish on what should have been an obvious feature. This also seems like the kind of game where it would have been really easy to implement a level select, but no such luck there either. I don't care what anyone says, there's definitely no excuse for this one. I know I ragged on this game a ton, but as usual, it comes from a place of frustration because I believe this could have been done so much better. All of the elements are there, especially as far as the presentation goes. And, for the most part, the controls are on point. The boss fights are absolutely fantastic, and it goes to show how strong this game can be for the one-on-one fights. But then there's the dynamic difficulty, which unquestionably comes down to play until the game gets too hard, then lose and we'll make the game easier for you. Look, if you like that style, if that's how you like your games, more power to you. For me, that's a slippery slope that easily leads to disaster, and God Hand is the prime example. There is an art to proper difficulty balancing, and God Hand didn't even try. This style of game design discourages the player from growing their skill. There is so much randomness and lack of consistency that the game is made worse for it. If I could simply set the game at static difficulties, then I wouldn't mind replaying the whole thing over again multiple times. I could see myself getting better with each playthrough and learning the game more effectively. But instead, my only options are to have the difficulty jump all over the place, or I set it to hard difficulty and it's stuck on level die permanently. Is that really the best option? I don't think so. Of course, with enough practice, you can eventually get really good at this game and do some cool things. But it's the exact same thing I said about Wonderful 101. That first playthrough is so important to help the player get on board. Unlike Wonderful 101, however, God Hand does have a really strong foundation. Enemy variety, level design, player customization. There are a lot of really good individual elements and a lot to love in this game. It just feels like it only caters to two kinds of people. Complete casuals who don't mind playing on easy, and absolute masochists who only enjoy an insane challenge. If you're someone like me who sits somewhere in the middle, then the difficulty is going to jump all over the place and you'll never feel like you have a solid ground to stand on. The worst part is that this could have been fixed by just having static difficulties like every other game. But they went with this experimental feature instead, and in my opinion, it nearly ruined everything. I like God Hand a good bit. I just really wish I could like it more. Thanks for watching my review on God Hand.